Just like trends in fashion, they are trends in illustration defined by certain groups. In the case of material design, it was founded by Google in 2004, codenamed quantum paper, and has since become a widespread phenomenon. These trends have a habit of fluctuating between complex realism, called skeuomorphism, and more playful abstract. In skeuomorphism designs, designers will strive to create the graphic as close as possible to its real-life counterpart. This can involve using hundreds of colours, elaborate shadow effects and textures in order to achieve three-dimensional realism. When applied to a digital interface, the design tends to scream louder than its actual function. The aim of flat design is to work at a level where a symbol is simple but creative and immediately identifiable with its function. Quite simply, flat design is creative art in its raw and beautiful state without the bells and whistles. A trend derived from flat design is material design. So, what is material design? Material design is flat design with very subtle effects added to give a slight shine or shadow as an example. It's used when flat design just needs to be taken that little bit further. One simple shape applied to a flat design can create elaborate effects. One such trend of material design is the long shadow, which, when applied, gives the impression that the graphic is elevated from its background. This is what's known as the Z-axis. Another, especially in the case of icons, is to treat backgrounds and other elements to two colours to suggest a fold in the supposed material, the material being paper. So we're going to explore material design to create a range of attractive icons. So let's jump in and start work. The first stage of the sketching process is to develop a drawing on paper. The sketch should be as good as your artistic talent will allow and as close to the final design as you'd like it to be. The image of the sketch can be brought to your computer by various means. Some options include scanner, iPhone camera, iPad camera, other tablet camera or digital camera. The steps you take to import the image to your computer will depend upon the method you choose and the software that you use. Of all options, I would recommend that a scanner is used because it gets closer to the detail of the image. Once we have the image on our computer, we can bring it into Illustrator by doing the following. Going to File, then Place. Then we locate the file on our computer and it allows us to import it into Illustrator to trace. So here's a less than perfect but adequate sketch of my light bulb, and we're now going to proceed to convert this into a vector icon. So I'm going to go ahead and select the pen tool to begin, and I'm going to select red as a colour. Now if we look at the shape, the most logical thing to do first is to draw a circle over the bulb. So selecting the ellipse tool, I'm going to hold shift so that we draw a perfect circle and not an oval, and I'm going to go over the sketch with the circle like so. Now I'm going to reduce that very slightly, and I'm going to select the sketch. I'm going to go to the layers panel, or rather I'm going to go to the transparency panel. I'm going to bring the opacity down to 50%, just so we can see our pen over the top of the sketch. Now I'm going to select the pen tool again, and I'm going to continue on from the circle to draw the rest of the bulb shape. So clicking on the edge of the circle and clicking on the sketch beneath at the corner and pulling down a curve like so, and clicking across to the point where a pink line shows to denote that we're on the vertical. Clicking there, and I'm going to click upwards. Next, with the selection tool, I'm going to select the shape we've just drawn and the circle. I'm going to go to Pathfinder, make compound shape, expand, because I want this to be a single shape. Next, I'm going to select the rectangle tool. I'm going to draw over the shape to the halfway point. And with the selection tool, I'm going to hold shift and select the bulb shape underneath. And I'm going to go to the Pathfinder panel underneath shape modes minus front, rather intersect. And this leaves us with half of the bulb. Next, I'm going to copy across this half bulb. Go to edit copy. And we can go to edit paste if we like, or we can use the keyboard shortcut Alt and Shift. And I'm going to go to transform, reflect with a right mouse click. And in the menu, I'm going to select vertical, which is already selected. I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to merge this with this shape. So as you can see, a pink line appears with intersect written upon it. That means both shapes are flush. So selecting both those shapes with shift, I'm going to do the same again and go to the Pathfinder panel. I'm going to click make compound shape and click expand. And that makes that a single manageable shape. Next, I'm going to tackle the screw at the bottom of the bulb. So I'm going to use a rounded rectangle tool. And I'm going to draw over that, like so. With a selection tool, I'm going to replicate this with the Alt and Shift and just dragging a copy down, like so. Now for the final shape, it's a section of a circle, so we're going to go to the ellipse tool. I'm going to draw an oval shape, and with the rectangle tool, I'm going to draw over it, and I'm going to take a portion of it out by selecting both of these shapes, going to the Pathfinder panel, going to shape modes minus front, and this gives us this shape for the bottom of the bulb screw. Now, to ensure that all of these shapes, the bulb and the screw, are all aligned together, we're going to select all. We're going to go to the Align panel, and underneath Align Objects, we're going to select Horizontal Align Center. So there was a minor adjustment there. Now all of those elements are lined up vertically. So now I'm going to go ahead and colour the bulb. Selecting the actual bulb itself, I'm going to select an orangey yellow colour from the spectrum. That looks nice. Now I'm going to select the screw area, and I'm going to select a grey from the swatches and adjust that a tiny bit in the slider. Now if we select the bulb and move it across, because we don't really need the sketch anymore, but you can see that we do have an outstanding shape, and that's the shine of the bulb. So now we'll go on to develop that, and we see a circle here, so we'll go on and select the ellipse tool, and we'll draw a circle up here on the bulb, and we'll colour it white and reduce it in size. Next, I'm going to make sure I've got a stroke selected and no fill. So selecting the fill and going to the swatches, selecting none. And I'm going to highlight or select the pen tool. So with the pen tool, I'm going to start here on the bulb and click up here, and I'm going to pull out a curve. With that done, I go to the stroke panel, and for weight, I'm going to select 16. For the cap, I'm going to select round cap. And taking up the weight, by clicking the up arrow, we begin to see an increase in the size of this shape. With that done, we go to Object, Expand, ensure only stroke is checked, click OK. Now that converts the path into a shape. Now we can manipulate these to make it a bit more perfect. And grouping those, selecting both, holding shift and going to object, group, and we'll just move those down just a tiny bit more. There we go. Now, since moving the bulb away from the sketch, I have noticed an imperfection in the actual curve at the bottom of the bulb, so it's never too late to go in and make changes to make it perfect. So I'll do exactly that. With the zoom tool, I'm going to have a look at this fault in the curve. With the direct selection tool, I'm going to select the anchor point, and I'm going to bring this handle and raise it up. I'm going to take this handle and just pull it in ever so slightly. So this creates a more flowing curve. So with that done, we need to copy this half so that it's symmetrical. So I'm going to select the rectangle tool. I'm going to go over the half that we've just edited on the bulb. And I'm going to select the bulb, go to object on group so I can work with the parts of it. Selecting the rectangle, holding shift, selecting the bulb. In the Pathfinder panel, selecting intersect. And we're left with that half bulb that we edited. So with Alt and Shift, I'm going to copy that across, pulling across, going to transform with a right mouse click, going to reflect, and selecting vertical, clicking OK, and holding Shift to keep it on the horizontal. I'm going to merge these two together, holding Shift, and going to the Pathfinder panel, selecting Make Compound Shape and Expand. Selecting that again, go to Object, Arrange, Send Back, so we now see the shine of the bulb. Now to give some greater detail to the bulb, I'm going to copy this across, and I'm going to copy it across again. Now, I'm going to place this, I'll colour it blue, bring it at the front. I'm going to place this over this shape. I'm going to select both shapes. I'm going to go to Pathfinder, beneath Shape Modes, minus front. Holding Shift to keep it on the horizontal, I'm going to drag over to this original bulb. Making sure it's on top, Object, Arrange, bring to front. I'm now going to go to the Colours panel, and I'm going to increase the magenta with this slider, like so. So this gives a greater detail and depth to the graphic and helps it overall and shining as an aesthetically pleasing icon. And to give some extra detail, I'm going to select the bottom shape and I'm going to take this up with a slider, the black slider, and a little bit of cyan. So I'm just going to switch off the sketch because we no longer need it, and I'm going to select all shapes and I'm going to go to Object Group so that this is treated as the singular object. So now I'm going to go ahead and select the ellipse. I'm going to draw out a circle holding Shift, and I'm going to go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back. I'm going to select all these objects, and in the Pathfinder panel, the Align panel rather, I'm going to go beneath Align Objects to Horizontal Align Center. This will bring all the elements into alignment on the vertical axis. Now, I want to take the circle, and with the sliders, I'm going to find an appropriate colour for our light bulb icon. Now the original colour we had, which was grey, a bluish grey, is actually appropriate. It's looking very nice. So it's never too late to make changes or corrections. So with the direct selection tool, I'm going to make the screw part light grey, adjusting in the sliders, clicking the bottom shape again to make this different, And there we go. Now, if this icon was to be part of a set that shares the same effects, what we need to do is paste in the universal effect. In this case, it's a shadow, and this is taken from the pizza icon. So we'd use this piece as a guide to apply the same effect to this icon using the same angles. So I'm going to go ahead, place this over here, and you'll see how I can apply an effect to this icon using the shape as a guide. So I'm going to select the pen tool, click up here, and you'll see I'm now flush, the same angle as the shape. Click down here. And we'll just complete the shape. The most important thing is the angles, just so that when all icons are together they look consistent. So we're rid of the original shape. I'm going to select the bulb and I'm going to bring it to the front. Go into Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. Now I'm going to adjust the shape. Like so. And I'm going to make it more pleasing to the eye around these sections. So with the pen tool, I'm just going to draw on an extra shape there. Select both those shapes. Go to Pathfinder, Make Compound Shape, and expand. Zooming out with the zoom tool. I'm going to select the light bulb, go to Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. I'm going to select the shape beneath that we've just drawn. With the eyedropper tool, I'm going to match it against a circular background. And in the slider, the colour panel, I'm going to bring the slider down to make a lighter colour with the black slider. And selecting the circle alongside the shape we've just drawn. Going to go to Pathfinder and Divide. With the Direct Selection tool, I'm going to get rid of this piece. And to make things perfect, I'm going to work on these pieces down here. So now I'm going to go in and remedy this with the pen tool. I'm going to click down here, make an anchor point there, run up here and finish up here. Clicking out here, and we make that shape, and in the layers panel I'm going to bring the shape down beneath the light bulb so that it's behind. And if we select the circle, go to Object, Ungroup, I can just pair this shape with its neighbouring shape by going to Pathfinder, Make Compound Shape and Expand. So with that change done, it looks like there's some substance to the bottom of the bulb. So you can see a shadow, or rather a ray of light, and you can't see behind the bulb on the screw portion. So that marks the completion of the light bulb icon. So here we have the sketch of a pepperoni pizza. Now I've placed the sketch onto the artboard by going to File, Place, locating the file, and then that places that on the artboard. So I'm going to jump right in and I'm going to select the ellipse tool. I'm going to select a brown coloured fill. I'm going to hold Shift and I'm going to draw out a circle. Holding Shift allows us to draw a circle rather than an oval shape. I'm going to align that with the edge of the pizza crust, like so. Next, I'm going to draw a second circle with no fill. I'm going to go to the swatches, select no fill, none for no fill, and I'm going to select a white stroke after selecting stroke in the tools panel. I'm going to select the ellipse tool again and I'm going to draw out a circle. I'm going to position that. And I'm going to go to the stroke panel and I'm going to select 16. I'm going to bring that up slightly. Now, using the selection tool, I'm going to select the circle. I'm going to go to the transparency panel and I'm going to bring the opacity down to 50% so that I can see the sketch of the pizza beneath. As you can see, that stroke matches up well with the negative space of the sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and select the path. I'm going to go to Object, Expand, and I'm going to ensure that stroke is checked, and I'm going to click OK. Now that circular path is now converted into a solid ring shape. I'm going to colour this red, just for the example, and I'm going to hold Shift and select the circle behind. Now, in the Align panel, if we go to Align To, we need to ensure that Align To selection is highlighted, which it is. And underneath Align Objects, we click Horizontal Align Center, just to ensure that everything's lined up in the circle. And likewise, we go to Vertical Align Center, and it looks as if that's aligned pretty much already. Now with those two shapes selected, go to Pathfinder and select minus front. This deducts the front shape from the shape at the back. Now to take out a slice from this full pizza, I'm going to select the shape. I'm going to go to Pathfinder, make compound shape, and I'm going to click expand. Now this treats the shape as a singular because it's now a singular whole shape. Now I'm going to select the shape and make it transparent again by going to the transparency panel and bringing the opacity down to 50%, just so we can still see the sketch behind. Now I'm going to select the pen tool and I'm going to take out a wedge from the circle, which represents a slice of pizza. So clicking into the circle, clicking out following the sketch, creating an anchor point, moving down to create another anchor point, at the point where a pink line appears which denotes the perfect horizontal. So clicking out there and clicking back to the original anchor point. Holding Shift, we select the circle behind, or circles, and we go to the Pathfinder panel and click Intersect. Now this leaves us with the slice of pizza. So if we select the shape and we go to the transparency panel, bring the opacity down to 50% again, just so we can see the details of the sketch. As you can see, there's 3 pieces of pepperoni, 2 halves and 1 full piece. So I'm going to go ahead and select the ellipse tool from the tools panel, and I'm just going to select red from the swatches. I'm going to go ahead and draw the circle on each position, like so. Now I'm going to select all of those, holding Shift, all circles and the slice of pizza. In the Pathfinder panel, I'm going to select Divide beneath Pathfinders. And using the Direct Selection tool, I'm going to take out these portions of the pepperoni. So now that the sketch has no further use, we can isolate this by bringing it down, and we can begin to colour it in the colour that pizza is. So I'm going to try the base first, and I'm going to mess around with the sliders in the colour panel just to try and obtain a nice colour of a bready, cheesy pizza. I think we're going to go towards a yellowish colour. Like so. And I think the crust's already at a colour which resembles a crust, but we'll experiment further with that. And I'm going to select the pepperoni pieces, and I'm going to increase the darkness of the red by taking up the K slider, which denotes black, just to make it a darker red to resemble pepperoni. And there we have it. the completed pizza slice. So the final touch is mounting this upon a shape, and I think I'm going to select a circle. So selecting the ellipse tool from the tools panel and going to object, arrange, center back. I'm going to select the eyedropper tool and I'm going to match the bread of the pizza. Using the slider, I'm going to bring down the yellow to try and find a suitable colour. Just adjusting these, and I think I'm happy with that. Next, I'm going to introduce an effect, which I'll go on to introduce. I'm going to click the pen tool. I'm going to click the anchor point of the pizza at its point. I'm going to click outside of the circle, and I'm going to create another anchor point up here. And I'm going to click the top anchor point of the pizza, and I'm going to close that shape. Now I'm going to select that shape. I'm going to go to the layers panel, and I'm just going to bring it down beneath the pizza. And I'm going to go to the colors panel, and I'm going to use the sliders again just to introduce a different color. Like so. With that done, selecting that shape, holding shift, selecting the circle, we go to the pathfinders panel, select divide. Using the direct selection tool, I can take out this piece outside the circle. And the final touch, I'm just going to select this shape and turn up the black to make it darker, to act as a shadow. And that marks completion of the pizza icon. And now I'm going to develop my clipboard icon. As you can see, I've placed my sketch into the document by going to File and Place as usual. So to start work, I'm going to select the rounded rectangle tool, and I'm going to select the colour. I'll select pink, nice and vibrant, and I'm going to drag out a rounded rectangle. Now using the keyboard, I'm going to press the down arrow to reduce the curve of the rounded rectangle. And I'm happy with that. With that done, so that no further changes can be made to the corners of the rounded rectangle, we're going to select it, we're going to go to Object, and we're going to go to Flatten Transparency. I'm going to click OK. So that ensures that this shape remains as it is. Okay, I'm going to select that. I'm going to go to the transparency panel, and I'm going to reduce the opacity to 50% so that we can see the sketch underneath. Again, I'm going to draw another rounded rectangle for the paper on the clipboard. So clicking and pulling out a shape and using the down arrow on the keyboard to reduce the roundedness of the corners. And I'm happy with that. And again, going to Object, Flatten Transparency, and clicking OK to finalize that shape. Selecting both those shapes, holding Shift, going to the Align panel, and underneath Align Objects, Horizontal Align Center. Clicking that will ensure those two are aligned on the vertical. Now, I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to bring this down to 50% also, so I can see the sketch underneath again. Now we're going to tackle the abstract text, and for this I'm going to use the rounded rectangle once again, and I'm going to draw out a shape. Pressing the up arrow on the keyboard, I can achieve that shape. I'm going to colour that white, so selecting white in the swatches, and with Shift and Alt I'm going to make a copy of that, and I'm going to make another copy. Now selecting those three shapes, I'm going to go to Object, Flatten Transparency, and OK, so that no further changes can be made to the curves of these shapes. Now I'm going to select each shape, and I'm going to go to the Align panel. Underneath Distribute Objects, I'm going to click Vertical Distribute Bottom. And although there was no change, this does ensure that those three are equal distance from each other. To demonstrate that, I'll move that one down and we'll go to the same option once again. And you'll see it adjusts the middle one. Next, I'm going to develop the ticks in the design. So I'm going to go to None for fill. I'm going to select Stroke, and I'm going to select a colour, in this case red, and I'm going to select the pen tool. And I'm going to draw the ticks with the pen tool. So making an anchor point, holding shift to keep it on the vertical, I'm going to click on an anchor point just down from the first, and I'm going to click across holding shift still and creating another anchor point, and this creates our tick shape. And I'm going to increase the size of that stroke by going to the stroke panel, and I'm going to select 9, and I'm going to increase from there. Now that looks good. Now that I'm happy with that, I'll go to Object, Expand, and ensure that stroke is ticked. Clicking OK, we now have the solid shape. So I'm going to rotate that by going to the edge of the shape until we get a double arrow, as you see there. And I can drag that across, placing that there. I'm going to do an Alt and a Shift to copy that, and an Alt and a Shift again for the last one. Now selecting all three, holding Shift, I'm going to go to the Pathfinder panel, the Align panel rather, and I'm going to go to Vertical Distribute Center once again underneath Distribute Objects. And it appears this one's fine also. Just increasing that in size. I'm going to colour those white for the time being. Now, I'm going to give this some colour. I'm going to turn up the transparency of this because we no longer need to see the sketch for now. I'm going to colour that a brown. Now the inner shape is actually paper, so I'm going to colour that white, taking the opacity up to 100%. Now we've got the ticks. Ticks are normally green to denote something being correct, so I'm going to colour those green. And these shapes represent abstract writing, so I'm going to just assign a grey to those for now. And I'm going to group the objects by going to Object Group and grouping all. Now I'm going to go back to the transparency panel and I'm going to take it down to 50% so I can see the sketch once again. So I can go to work on the clip at the top of the clipboard. The first thing I'm going to do is select a circle to place that up top. Selecting red. It's a vibrant colour that stands out over the sketch. And I'm going to use a rounded rectangle. Go into the tools, selecting rounded rectangle, and I'm going to draw that out there. Go into Object, Flatten Transparency, clicking OK, so that this locks down those rounded corners and no further changes can be made. Highlighting the circle and the rounded rectangle, going to Align, underneath Align Objects, selecting Horizontal Align Center. So those are now centered. Ungrouping those, selecting the rectangle tool and using a rectangle just to cut the bottom portion off this shape above. By going to Pathfinder, underneath Shape Modes minus front, so we're left with this shape. Now I'm going to combine both those shapes to make it one by going to the Pathfinder, make compound shape and clicking expand. Now I'm going to reduce the transparency, the opacity in the transparency panel down to 50% so I can see the sketch beneath. I'm going to draw in our circle with the ellipse tool, as you see here. And I'm going to turn that up just to see how that looks, colouring the circle white. Highlighting both, holding shift. Going to align underneath align objects, horizontal align center. Moving this up slightly with the up arrow on the keyboard. Clicking both. Going to Pathfinder, beneath shape modes. Go to minus front. So this takes out the circle from this shape. Putting the transparency down once again to 50%. We have a shape at the bottom. So I'm actually going to use a rounded rectangle. And I'm going to bring this down, adjusting the curves with the up arrow on the keyboard. And centering this by going to align objects, horizontal align center. Going to object to flatten down the transparency again, clicking OK because we're happy with the curves. Highlighting both, holding shift. Go to Pathfinder, clicking divide beneath Pathfinders. Clicking the direct selection tool, clicking the shape beneath. We can deduct that by pressing backspace on the keyboard. Now there's a final shape below, which suggests a shadow, as if there's a pad of paper on the clipboard. So I'm going to put that there for now. I'm going to go to Object, Ungroup. I'm going to make sure that these three shapes and the clip above are all centered. So go to Align underneath Align Objects, Horizontal Align Center. So there we have it, all shapes are now aligned. Now let's get to work on the colouring. I'm going to select the clip and I'm going to bring the transparency up to 100%. I'm going to colour it gold. I'm looking for some form of gold colour to suggest that it's made of metal. That looks nice. I'm going to select the direct selection tool, the eyedropper, and then I'm going to bring that up on the slider for the black in the colour panel to there. I'm going to select the actual board of the clipboard and I'm going to try a dark brown by bringing the black up. For the writing, I'm going to select all three and I'm going to reduce the black so it's less prominent. For the ticks, selecting all, holding shift. I'm going to bring down the cyan. I'm going to make sure this shape is above. Ungrouping this. Grouping those and make sure that's above the shadow at the bottom, which it is. So, reading of the sketch. That marks completion of the clipboard, and all we need to do now is add its background. Highlighting all, we'll go to Object Group so that it's one manageable unit, and selecting the ellipse tool and drawing a circle behind. Going to Object, Arrange, Center Back. Highlighting all. Going to the Align panel underneath Align Objects, Horizontal Align Center. Clicking upon that, and that centers the clipboard. And again, we're going to go to Edit Paste and we're going to apply the same shape to the clipboard design so that it has the same kind of shadowing effect. And just reducing this slightly, moving it. Clicking the graphic, going to Object Arrange, bring to front. Making this a little bit smaller. And selecting that shape, holding Shift, selecting the circle, going to the Pathfinder and clicking Divide. Using the Direct Selection tool, we're rid of this shape here. And selecting that shape, we use the eyedropper tool to select the colour of the brown on the circle. And we can use the sliders in the colour panel to adjust, just to give that effect. Now I'm not happy with the brown, so I'm going to select the circle and I'm going to have a fish around the spectrum to see if I can find a suitable colour. That's the colour I'm looking for. So selecting this shape beneath, using the eyedropper tool and matching it with the circular colour and taking the black slider up to get a darker version of it. That marks this icon complete. So here we have my sketch of a paint palette which I imported into Illustrator using File and Place. So I'm going to select the sketch and I'm going to lock it down in the Layers panel. Now I'm going to use the Ellipse tool with a red colour so it stands out over the sketch, and I'm going to drag out a circle holding Shift. And I'm going to place it there over the sketch of the palette. I'm also going to draw another circle here. Next, I'm going to use the pen tool to draw the curve at the top and the curve at the bottom to make a complete solid shape. So selecting the pen tool, clicking here on the circle, clicking up here, pulling out a curve, clicking the anchor point, clicking the circle down here, pulling out another curve, like so, and clicking here. Now we're just going to make the shape transparent so that we can see the sketch beneath. In the transparency panel, I'm going to put the opacity to 50%. Clicking the anchor point again to continue drawing the shape. I'm going to click an anchor point down here in the middle of the curve. Just adjusting slightly. And clicking one down here to complete the shape. Now I'm going to turn the opacity up. I'm going to select all shapes. And I'm going to go to Pathfinder, make compound shape, expand. So this is now a solid shape. With that done, I'm going to go to the Layers panel, unlock the sketch, and I'm going to click the eye icon because I no longer want to see the sketch. I want to analyse this shape to see what corrections need to be made to make it into a flowing shape. As you can see, the curve at the top isn't perfect, neither is the curve at the bottom, and we have a little error here. So we need to rectify those things to make the perfect graphic. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to tackle the curve at the top first. With the Direct Selection tool, I'm going to manipulate this curve with this handle. I'm going to pull it out towards the right hand side, like so, and that's that curve fixed. The curve at the bottom, I'm going to click on the anchor point and use this handle and pull out a more pleasing curve, and that's that fixed. Next, I'm going to click the anchor point here. I'm going to go to the pen tool. I'm going to hold the icon in the bottom right hand corner and I'm going to select delete anchor point, and I'm going to zoom in. Selecting delete anchor point once again, and I'm going to use a Direct Selection tool to manipulate this curve to pull it out. like so. I'm going to zoom out, holding Alt, and I'm just going to adjust this here by clicking on that anchor point, just to make that one a little bit more perfect. Clicking out, and I'm happy with that shape, which is going to be our paint palette. So now I'm going to switch the sketch back on, and I'm going to assign some transparency, and I'm going to switch it down to around 50. Just to see what shapes are going to add to this. As you can see, we're going to add a hole into the palette. That's where the thumb is put through the palette. And of course, we're going to add the paint. So I'm going to select the ellipse tool, and I'm going to drag out a shape, and I'm going to rotate it by going to the edge of the shape until the arrows appear. And rotating it like so, just pulling it in very slightly and resizing it. Now I'm going to use a circle for the paint to keep it simplistic. I'm going to hold Shift, pull out a circle, and then using Alt and Shift, I'm going to make copies of this circle. Like so. Now I'm going to get rid of the sketch by clicking the eye in the layers panel, and I'm going to colour the palette grey, and I'm going to turn up the opacity. We'll turn it down slightly, and I'm going to cut out this shape, holding Shift, selecting the palette, going to the Pathfinder panel and selecting minus front, so this deducts the shape at the front from the shape at the back, which was the palette. Now I'm going to proceed to colour the paint. So we'll select that one. I'm going to select a yellow, then a blue, then a green, then a purple. Adjusting this yellow just to make it a little bit more prominent. And there we have it. Those are the paints and the hole complete in the palette. Now I'm going to go ahead and group all of these shapes, object group, and I'm going to draw the circular background, dragging out a circle, holding Shift, and I'm going to go to arrange, send to back, and I'm going to position this in the center. Just to make sure, I'm going to go to align object, horizontal align center, and I'm going to colour the palette white. And the most appropriate colour I think is going to be for this is a grey. So I'm going to select the grey, taking the black up, and I'm happy with that. But I'm going to separate this circle into two. Selecting the pen tool, ensuring there's no fill by going to none and swatches, selecting stroke, clicking at 9 o'clock anchor on the circle, clicking at the 3 o'clock anchor on the circle, and selecting both path and circle, and clicking in the Pathfinder panel, divide, and going to object, arrange center back. With the direct selection tool, I'm going to select the half above and click fill, and I'm going to take down the black slider like so, and that marks completion of the palette icon. Here we have my sketch of a pencil, which I've placed into Illustrator using File, Place. Now, although this is on an angle, I'm not going to illustrate it on an angle. I'm going to illustrate it on the horizontal, and I'll apply the angle later. So the first thing I want to do is select the rounded rectangle, and I'm going to select a colour. I'm going to select a brown, and I'm going to draw out the rounded rectangle. and I'm going to place it like that. Now you'll see the pencil sectioned off into a razor. There's a gold band, it's going to be gold, and there's the tip of the pencil and the actual graphite. So I'm going to go ahead and section off those portions with the pen tool. So selecting the pen tool, ensuring there's no fill. I'm going to create a fill of white, and I'm going to click an anchor point here. That's for the eraser. Again, I'm going to click another anchor point. And one further down. Mistake there. Holding shift to ensure that it's on the vertical. And there we go. I'm going to draw another one here. And with the selection tool, selecting all, then going to the Pathfinder panel. Underneath Pathfinders, I go to Divide. And with the Direct selection tool, I'm going to pick out this portion. I'm going to select the eraser at the end of the pencil. I'm going to choose a pink from the palette, ensuring that fill is selected, selecting the pink, and I'm going to use the sliders to adjust this to the colour of a typical eraser. Now I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to colour the gold ring, and I'm going to use the spectrum to select a nice gold colour, and use a slider just to refine the gold to make it a little bit more brighter. I'm going to select the pen tool, and I'm going to draw the nib of the pencil. So clicking on this anchor point at the top left hand corner of the square, I'm moving down until the pink line appears to denote that we're on the horizontal, and clicking down and completing the triangle by clicking the original anchor point. Now with the pen tool and no fill selected, by going to none and the swatches, clicking fill, stroke rather, and selecting white from the swatches. Click an anchor point up here, an anchor point down there to draw a line, and highlighting that stroke and the triangle, we can go to Pathfinder, underneath Pathfinders, Divide. Now selecting that smaller triangle, I'm going to select the grey from the swatches, ensuring that the fill is selected rather than the stroke. And I'm going to begin colouring this pencil the way I'd like it. Now I'm going to switch off the sketch because we don't need it anymore. And I'm going to focus on the illustration. So looking at this, I can now see that the goldish colour is now clashing with the orange. So I'm going to change this to a silver. And switching that down in the colour panel. And I want to select the eraser. I want to bring that up slightly in colour. Now ensuring there's no fill, I'm going to select none from the swatches, and I'm going to select white for a white stroke. With the pen tool, I'm going to click at the tip of the pencil, and I'm going to run through the pencil and create another anchor point at the right hand side. Selecting everything, going to the Pathfinder panel and clicking Divide. I've now got a series of shapes. Now these shapes at the bottom I'm going to use for the shadowed areas of the pencil. So to demonstrate, I'm going to click the graphite of the pencil, And I'm going to nudge up the black in the colour panel, like so. And for this, the wooden part of the pencil nib, I'm going to move the black up, the black slider in the colour panel. Same for the orange. Moving up the black slider. And for the silver, or grey as it is, moving up the black slider. You'll see there's only one slider for this because it only consists of the colour black. And for the eraser, also moving up that black slider. So selecting all of it and moving to the edge of the shape so that we get the arrow symbol, and we can now rotate it like so. Now I'm going to apply the circle with the ellipse tool, so holding shift so that we draw a perfect circle. Go to object, arrange, send to back, and selecting all, I'm going to go to align object, horizontal align center, and I'm going to paste in our guide. So I can draw the same shadow effect as what I have in previous icons on the same angle. You'll see I'm running flush with it. And deleting that. Selecting the pencil, going to object, arrange, bring to front. Selecting that shape and the circle, I'm going to go to Pathfinder, divide. I'm just going to take out that part there. Now for the circle, I'm going to choose a colour from the spectrum. And purple's one I'm happy with. Selecting this shape, the shadow, using the eyedropper tool, selecting the purple and just bringing the black up on the slider and the colour panel. So it's never too late to make changes, so I want to make the pencil stand out a little bit more, so I'm going to colour the body of the pencil yellow rather than orange. So selecting the orange, in the slider I'm going to bring down the magenta to make it more yellow. Selecting the second piece, I'm going to match the yellow and I'm going to move the magenta slider up rather than the black. Here's a sketch of my watermelon that I've placed into the document using File and Place. Now I'm going to select the sketch, I'm going to go to the Layers panel and I'm going to lock that down, clicking until a padlock appears. So now I can use a pen tool on top of this or the geometrical shapes. I'm going to select the ellipse tool. I'm going to select a bright colour from the swatches panel. I'm going to choose a hot pink and I'm going to draw out an oval shape over the sketch. So that we can see the sketch behind, I'm going to select the shape, go to the transparency panel and bring the opacity down to 50%. With that done, I'm going to select another ellipse of a different colour. I've selected blue and I'm going to go over the sketch again. I'm actually going to hold shift to draw out a perfect circle. Like so. And I'm also going to assign some transparency to this by taking the opacity down to 50%. Now I'm going to select another ellipse of a different colour. I'm going to select orange, and I'm going to draw out the circle, holding shift once again. Now I'm going to select the circle behind, holding shift, and I'm going to go to align. Beneath align objects, I'm going to click horizontal align center. That brings them together on the vertical. And I'm going to click vertical align center. And you'll see both circles are now perfectly centered. I'm going to select all shapes. And I'm also going to go to align once again and click horizontal align center. And it looks as if they're already centered. So next, I'm going to select a rectangle. I'm going to drag it down to here. And I'm going to select all shapes. And I'm going to click in the Pathfinder panel, divide. With the direct selection tool, I'm going to highlight all the shapes above and I'm going to click backspace on the keyboard. Turning off the sketch by clicking the padlock in the layers panel and then the eye, we can see what we've drawn. Now we've got a couple of stray paths or shapes at either side, so I'll just highlight those, select and delete using backspace on the keyboard. So here's the shape we're left with, which is resembling a watermelon, and we're going to bring it to life with some colour. So with the direct selection tool, I'm going to select the shape at the bottom. I'm going to turn the opacity back up, and I'm going to select the green from the spectrum, and I'm looking for a dark green which resembles that of a watermelon. I'm happy with that. Now for this portion, I want a kind of cream colour. Using the slider, bringing the yellow down and bringing the magenta down. And the cyan. And the final piece needs to be red. So there we have the watermelon. Now we need to add the pips. Now to draw the seeds, I'm going to select the ellipse tool. I'm going to draw out a circle holding shift. With the pen tool, I'm going to click here and I'm going to click up here until the pink line appears to denote perfect center on the vertical. And I'm going to click down. That looks okay. Selecting both shapes, go in the Pathfinder panel, selecting Make Compound Shape, selecting Expand, selecting the Rectangle tool, dragging over this, selecting both shapes, and I'm going to select Intersect in the Pathfinder panel. I'm going to copy the shape with Alt and Shift. I'm going to right click, Transform, Reflect, and with Vertical checked, I'm going to click OK. Now holding shift to keep the shapes on the horizontal, I'm going to join these where it is intersect, that means they're lined up perfectly. Selecting both shapes, go on the Pathfinder panel, make compound shape, clicking expand to make it a single shape. Now I'm going to take one of these, reducing it in size, holding shift to keep proportions. Going to introduce one here on the pink line because that denotes the perfect center. Holding shift and alt, I'm going to make another one. Shift and alt again, I'm going to drag one off to the side, a copy. Place one there. Shift and alt again to make a copy. And placing one there. Now to make sure the pips are symmetrical, I'm going to select all, holding shift, and I'm going to go to Pathfinder, make compound shape, expand, so that all these pips are treated as a single shape. Now, I'm going to use a rectangle tool. I'm going to place it there. And I'm going to hold shift and select the pips. And in the Pathfinder, I'm going to click minus front. With Alt and Shift, I'm going to take a copy of these pips, right click, transform, reflect. With vertical checked, I'm going to select OK. And I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to align all pips. Holding shift, selecting the rest, going to Pathfinder, make compound shape, expand. And that's the watermelon graphic complete. All that remains is to add the circle to the background to make it an icon. So I'm going to select all of the parts of the melon, go to Object Group, and I'm going to go to the ellipse and draw out the circle. I'm going to go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back. And now I'm going to select both, go to Align, and click Horizontal Align Center. That makes sure they're both aligned. And I'm going to select the circle and I'm going to try and find a nice colour in the spectrum for our watermelon icon. Now I'm happy with that. And I'm going to do something here. I'm going to use the pen tool. I'm going to select none for the fill and I'm going to have a stroke of white. Now on the anchor point at 9 o'clock on the circle, I'm going to click across and click across to 3 o'clock. Now with the path selected and the circle selected, holding shift, I'm going to go to the Pathfinder and click divide. Now I'm going to go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back. And I'm going to make this circle background a two-tone. So it's going to be one colour at the top and a different colour at the bottom. So this two-tone design of the circle looks as if it's either folded paper or the watermelon is sat on a table. Now looking at the watermelon, I can see that there's transparency still assigned to the shape. So I'm going to turn the opacity up to 100%. And I'm actually happy with how that looks at 100%. So I'm going to leave that there. And that marks the completion of the watermelon icon. So here I have my scan of a microphone. And I inserted as usual by going to File and Place. Now I'm going to go right ahead and start developing this in Vector. I'm going to select the rounded rectangle tool and a bright colour from the swatches. And I'm going to draw out here. I'm going to draw the stand first. And switching off that fill, I'm actually going to select the stroke, a red stroke, go into the stroke panel. I'll select 20 point and I'm going to move this up just to increase the thickness, and that'll do. Now we'll go to Object, Expand, ensure Stroke is selected and click OK. With that done, I'm going to take the rectangle tool and I'm going to use this to cut. Selecting both, holding shift, I go to Pathfinder, Shape Modes, and minus front. And I'm going to use a rectangle tool to do this bottom shape. Holding shift and clicking the stand above, I'm going to go to Align, and I'm going to click Horizontal Align Center to make sure those two are both centered. Now I'm going to go to the rounded rectangle tool. And I'm going to do the base, and using the down arrow on my keyboard to decrease the curvature of the corners, And there we go. I'm going to use the rectangle tool to cut that again. Holding shift and selecting the base, going to Pathfinder and selecting minus front. There we go. And holding shift, selecting all three, going to the align panel, and beneath align objects, selecting horizontal align center. There we go. And with the rounded rectangle tool again, I'm going to do this shape up here. And I'm going to do the microphone heads. With the down arrow, the up arrow rather, on the keyboard, I'm going to make it into this pill shape. Selecting all. Actually, I'm going to select these two, holding shift, and I'm going to go to Pathfinder and making that a compound shape. Selecting all, going to align, and horizontal align center. Now with that done, I'm going to select the sketch. I'm going to go to the layers panel, expand it, and I'm going to click the eye so I can no longer see the sketch. And I'm going to go to work on the details of the graphic. Now I'm going to colour the base, the stand, a silver colour, so it looks like a silver metal. And adjusting the sliders, I'm going to keep it that colour with a hint of blue in. I'm going to select the heads of the microphone, and I'm going to colour this a more silver colour. I'll keep that like that. I might make adjustments later. I'm going to make this the same colour as the stand. Now I do want to make some changes to this shape, so I'm going to highlight those two, select and make a compound shape, and I'm going to click expand. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to select the rectangle tool, and I'm going to select the stand, and I'm going to go to shape modes in the Pathfinder panel and click minus front. And this is going to leave us with that, which looks a lot more clean. I'm going to adjust the base, bring it down, so that it has the same negative spaced gap as the head of the microphone and the stand. Now, switching the sketch back on, we can see we have shapes in the head of the microphone, so I'm going to use a rounded rectangle to make those. And I'll move that across. Make another one. And another one. And selecting all three, holding shift. If we go to the align panel and beneath distribute objects, we select vertical distribute center. This will align all three to ensure that equal spacing is between. Now, I'm going to colour those black, and holding shift, I'm going to select both shapes, the head of the microphone and the holes. I'm going to go to Pathfinder and selecting divide. I'm going to proceed to delete the excess at the side, pressing backspace on the keyboard. Now, I'm going to take these shapes, selecting all three, and with Alt and Shift, I'm going to drag across to make a copy. Right click, transform, reflect, ensuring vertical is selected, clicking OK, and holding Shift to keep it on the horizontal. We move that across until it hits the line where the pink shows intersect. So that means it's flush with the head of the side of the microphone. So that marks that portion complete. Now I'm going to add in the shape in the centre, which holds the head of the microphone in position. Like so. I'm going to use the eyedropper tool to match the microphone and the black slider in the colour palette, just to bring it down to make it lighter. And selecting those two shapes, the head of the microphone and the holder, I'm going to go to the alignment panel and select horizontal align center, and that's now centered. For this shape, I'm going to do a little effect at the bottom. Ensuring both are centered by going to the align panel, horizontal align center. And I'm going to go to the Pathfinder panel and select divide. With the direct selection tool, I'm going to select the excess and press backspace on the keyboard to get rid of it. Selecting it, I'm going to go up with the black slider in the color panel, like so. This creates a kind of shadowing effect. Now I'm going to select the rectangle tool, and I'm also going to apply a shadowing effect up here. Moving this shape in front by going to Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. And I'm going to use the direct selection tool to select the holes in the microphone, and using the black slider in the color panel, I'm going to bring down the colour to grey. Now, as a finishing touch, I'm going to give some shine to the microphone because they're normally made out of shiny chrome. So I'm going to select the rounded rectangle and I'm going to pull out a pill shape. And I'm going to place it here. I'm going to select white. And I'm going to go to the transparency panel and bring the opacity down to 50%. Like so. I'm going to try 40. With that done, I'm going to select the holes in the microphone. I'm going to go to Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. And there we have it. Now I'm going to select the sketch and switch it off in the layers panel by clicking the eye. And I'm going to ensure all of this is grouped by going to Object Group. And now I'm going to back it upon a circle. Selecting the ellipse tool and drawing a circle, holding Shift, going to Object, Arrange, Send to Back, and selecting both, going to the Align panel and selecting horizontal align center. If we give the circle some colour, we can see where we are, and I'll just align that again with horizontal align center. Now I think I fancy a pink colour for the circle, so I'm going to click upon the circle and select the hot pink from the swatches, and I'm going to finally tune in the colour palette with the sliders. And I'm happy with that. So that is the microphone icon complete. Here we have our completed material design icons. So if you didn't follow along already, give it a try, and if you're daring enough, you could make your own material icons using the same principles.